What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we are going to be talking about the Detroit Lions defense in particular. Today we're having a nice little discussion, so this is probably going to be a little bit of a longer video, so if you guys enjoy those type of videos, this is perfect for you. I'm glad you guys are here. Let's get it started. So welcome in everybody to another video. Welcome into another video. I don't know why I said that twice. I honestly have no idea. I said the same thing twice. You know what? Let's act like it didn't happen. Anyways, I decided to talk about some Detroit Lions defense today. And I have a lot of questions that I needed answers to. And I've been researching for a while now, trying to find these answers and really figure out what happened to the Detroit Lions defense. That may be the title. I don't know. It's going to be something like that. So originally today I got up and I was like, hey, I want to make a video on Justin Coleman. So I'm going back and I'm watching Justin Coleman. I watch his early games and I'm going to go see his late games because I know everybody talks about how early in the season he was really good. All of a sudden later in the season he wasn't. And like, what the heck happened there? So I wanted to go watch him and I wanted to go see both sides and, talk about what he does well and what he didn't do well and why maybe he fell off. Try to figure out why necessarily his stats went way down. So it started off with me just focusing on Justin Coleman. And then as I continued to watch, it really expanded to me talking about and thinking about the entire defense. And we'll get to that in a very quick second. So like I said, I was going to talk about Justin Coleman, who is the Lions slot cornerback who we signed to a 4-year, $36 million deal from Seattle. He also plays on the outside at times, but he's known as a slot cornerback. And with the Detroit Lions, I looked at his stats because I always look at the stats right away, like just to see what they are, just to kind of get a feel like, okay, let's just see what the numbers look like. And his numbers were pretty darn good. So what I wanted to do was go look at who the top cornerbacks were, or the top slot cornerbacks, I should say, in the NFL. So in 2019, there was a list of the top 11 slot cornerbacks in the NFL, and two guys on there, like near the top, were Kenny Moore and Chris Harris. I was like, all right, that's cool. So let's look at those guys' stats from 2019. So I'm going to run through this real quick, just to kind of give you guys a background as to what I'm getting into. So looking at Chris Harris, he allowed 65% completion percentage, 112 passer rating, 4 touchdowns. He had 1 interception. He had 56 total tackles. Then you look at Kenny Moore's stats. He allowed 70% completion percentage and 1 touchdown, 76.8 passer rating, 61 total tackles. So good stats right from a slot, because slots are usually going to have a really high completion percentages because they're in the slot and they're really easy to complete short passes. But then you look at Justin Coleman's stats, and Coleman actually looked pretty darn good. I mean, get this. Look at these numbers. He allowed 63% completion percentage, which is lower than those two. He also only allowed 6 touchdowns, which is more than those two, and 103 passer rating. But he did have that 1 interception, and he had 65 total tackles. So he's at least comparable to some of the top slot cornerbacks, according to, some people talking about the NFL. It's like, all right, that's really interesting. But what the heck happened? Because as I dug deeper and deeper into the early games for Justin Coleman, I came across more stats than just Justin Coleman stats. I came across the Detroit Lions defense and their secondary as a whole, and how great the secondary actually was. Because as I continue to watch, I'm saying, Justin Coleman is really good. Like, this dude, I'm like, now I got to watch when he falls off, because in the first 5 weeks, from what I've seen versus the Vikings, or whoever I'm watching, not the Vikings, but versus the Packers and, Chiefs and Chargers and those teams, this guy is super, super good. And I'm like, what the heck happened to this guy? Because this guy had to be balling out. I mean, his numbers were really, really good. And I unfortunately couldn't find the game logs on, his percentage of passes allowed. So that was unfortunate. So I kind of just had to use the eye test. My eye test told me this guy was balling out. I mean, versus the Packers, he was shutting down receivers. Shutting down Geronimo Allison. He gave up 1 touchdown. And that's like the play that everybody remembers because it's the one big touchdown. But aside from that, this dude, oh my gosh, he was shutting down players. He was looking really good. He looked really good in the early games that I watched. And then I came across some stats, and I really wanted to dig deeper into this because I knew he dropped off in the second half, but I didn't know how far he dropped off. But it turns out it wasn't just him that dropped off. We know Lions defense as a whole wasn't very good. And I'm watching, I'm saying, this defense doesn't look as bad as what the numbers say. They don't look as bad as the worst pass defense in the league. So I came across this stat, and this is probably going to shock you. But in the first 5 games the Lions played, listen to this. The Lions allowed 56.5% completion percentage and an 82.2 pass rating. In the first 5 games, that's what they allowed. Now, 56.5% completion percentage ranked 3rd in the league, and the 82.8 pass rating ranked 7th. That's what they ranked in the league, the first 5 games. Okay, so yeah, this defense was pretty good. Get this, Justin Coleman had 10 pass deflections. 10 pass deflections. All right, at that point in the season, 10 pass deflections, which was tied. It was tied at the time with Stephon Gilmore, who won Defensive Player of the Year. What, man? Are you kidding? That's the numbers he's putting up? So I'm thinking to myself, something big must happen. Something catastrophic has to happen to make a defense go like this to completely falling off to then at the end of the year, we forget about this. Like, I completely forgot that the defense was even this okay at the beginning of the year. They were actually good at the beginning of the year. And it wasn't like the defense as a whole was good because they weren't great at stopping the run. They weren't great at stopping the run the whole season. But for some reason, their secondary was balling out in the first 5 weeks. and it just fell apart. And it fell apart so bad that at one point, even Justin Coleman was looked at as possibly the worst cornerback in the league, which is crazy. How do you go from being that to possibly the worst cornerback in the league, allowing through 8 games, like an 8-game stretch in the season, or in the second half of the season, he allowed almost 600 yards receiving, which was 100 more than what Xavier Rhodes allowed. Okay, I'm thinking to myself, how in the world does this happen? How can you fall off like this? So now I'm digging into it, trying to figure out what happened with the secondary. But then as I do that, I'm getting even deeper into the team, and before I realize it, I'm thinking about the whole defense and what the heck happened to the whole defense, because the defense wasn't that bad, right? The defense was not that bad early in the season. Week 1 versus the Cardinals, they played really good until the very end, and they allowed them to come back and tie. Week 2 versus the Chargers, they held the Chargers to 10 points with a game-stealing interception by Darius Slay. You look at, really all of their first couple games. Eagles, they won the game. Wasn't the best defensive performance, but not bad. You only allowed 24 points on the road. You played a team like the Chiefs. You could have easily been 3-1. You played a team like the Chiefs who allowed 0 passing touchdowns from Mahomes. He was like 24 for 42. The numbers weren't crazy. They weren't balling out on you guys. So up through the Packers game, this defense was looking really good. And then all of a sudden, it just fell flat on its face, or at least the secondary was. So I'm trying to figure out what happened to this defense, because I don't think it's a simple answer. And I don't think the Lions honestly know the answer. I don't know if they do or not. And if there was one question I could say I want to ask Matt Patricia, it would be what happened after the first 5 games in the season. But he might not have a simple answer for that, because it didn't seem like they did after the season. Many people asked what happened, what went wrong this season. And a lot of people are like, hey, I don't really know what went wrong. We just have to go watch it and try to figure out what did go wrong. And when you look at how far the defense fell off, it seems like the answer can't be as simple as, well, you lost this guy got hurt, or there was a couple of injuries, or necessarily, oh, this guy got traded away, so that was it. It has to be a combination of things. Oh, there was a bad scheme. Because I can't just say there was a bad scheme when the scheme worked. The scheme worked at times, and other times it didn't. So it has to be deeper than that. Even in the first 5 games, the scheme seemed to work. Yes, you struggled to stop the run, but you still were pretty good in the secondary, which is weird. So I'm really trying to figure out what happened to the Detroit Lions after, the early season, okay? What happened? It really started in that Minnesota game. See, the Lions defense was pretty good up until the Minnesota game. All of a sudden, they played Minnesota, and Minnesota just went off. They scored 42 points. They had over 500 total yards. Kirk Cousins just absolutely balled out. Actually, I think I have the stats over here. Yeah, look at this. Okay, so Dalvin Cook ran for 142 rushing yards, and Kirk Cousins had 338 passing yards for 4 touchdowns in that game versus Minnesota. So that game is really where it all went downhill. That was the first time we were like, whoa. And it wasn't like that was the first time that the team could run on them, because that's not the answer. Because I think to myself, oh, that's a simple answer. The Lions just couldn't stop the run anymore. So that would be a simple answer. However, I went through every game and I looked at, what teams did against us when they ran the ball. And they were not very consistent when it came to rushing football. However, they still completed on us like crazy. It comes back to the secondary. What happened to the secondary? Because we did pretty good against the run in the second half. We did better in the second half of the season against the run than we did in the first half. I believe in the first 5 games, every game we allowed at least 100 yards rushing. I believe. And in the second half, we did good. And the concern was going into those games that, oh snap, we're playing against Saquon, Josh Jacobs, Ezekiel Elliott. We're going to get ran all over. But if you look at the stats, nowhere near where we ran all over. After the Vikings game, the concerns were high, but you played the Giants, you allowed 64 yards rushing to Saquon, which is just over 3 yards per carry. You allowed, 4.3 yards per carry to Josh Jacobs, who actually had a pretty darn good game. You allowed 2.8 yards per carry to Zeke Elliott. 2.8 yards per carry. That was the game we were supposed to get ran all over. 2.8 yards per carry. The Redskins, guys, 3.2 yards per carry. On and on. The Vikings, the second time we played the Vikings, 3.4 yards per carry for Dalvin Cook. You look at the Bucks, 2.1 yards per carry for their top running back. Across the board, there was a couple of games here and there where you would look at it and you say, okay, they ran there, like the Bears one time, the Raiders, Packers, the last game, they ran pretty well. They had like 100 yards rushing on 25 carries, 4 yards per carry. But there were a lot of games where we actually did really good when we were expected not to. So it's not simply just that, okay, we couldn't stop the run, because we were not really able to stop the run the first couple of games, but we still had a better defense. So what happened to our defense? I don't understand. So I'm really trying to figure this out. And I think I've came to a sort of a conclusion, but I don't think it's the final answer yet. I think I'm started. So I thought the best thing to do is go look and see what the Lions did this offseason. Because I think obviously Matt Patricia's not going to come out and say, hey, this is the problem, this is what we need to fix. He's not going to say that if he believes he knows what the problem was. He's not going to go say that. So the first thing I had to do was go back and look at what the Lions did this offseason. Where did the Lions spend their most money? Where did the Lions focus on improving this offseason? Because if I know where they wanted to improve, that tells me what the Lions thought was the issue, right? Linebacker position, and they would have spent a lot of money at the linebacker position, right? That's probably what they would have told me, or they would have tried to change it. So when you look at the biggest moves they made this offseason, what were they? Well, they traded away Darius Slay. Okay, so that's a big move. Obviously, we know why. We heard all about that. They signed Jamie Collins to 3 years, $30 million. I think that was like the biggest contract they gave out defensively. They gave the big contract out to the offensive lineman as well. But the biggest move defensively was signing Jamie Collins. You signed Desmond Trufant to over $10 million a year. So those are your two biggest signings. You traded for a new safety. You drafted Okudah, who was the top cornerback. You drafted Julian Okwara after you cut Devon Kennard. You got a new defensive lineman in free agency and the draft. Really, overall, you spent it on different spots. So, okay, that kind of gives me a little bit of an idea where you think the problem is, but not as in a whole. So now I have to look even deeper. Now I have to go look at Matt Patricia's interviews. And one move that I still really couldn't understand completely. Like, I understand they moved on from Diggs, but at the time it didn't make a lot of sense. Why would you trade away Quandre Diggs? I mean, this team wasn't out of anything like where it was like, oh yeah, they're out of contention. They can't compete anymore. They traded away Quandre Diggs, and at the time, it didn't seem to make a lot of sense because it was like, well, this team's sort of competitive. Are you setting up another trade? What are you doing here? I mean, you got him for like, what, a 5th round pick? Like, why would you do that? And there must have been something deeper to that whole situation because as I go and watch what Matt Patricia had to say about trading Quandre Diggs, it's a little bit different than what necessarily I was expecting to hear. And it sounded like he knew exactly why he did it. See, the Lions traded away Quandre Diggs the week after the Vikings game. To me, that doesn't make any sense because if everything is all fine and dandy, you have to look at that and say, okay, the Vikings game went wrong, but before that, our secondary was really good. Statistically, our secondary was really good in the first 5 games, so we can't trade him away. We got to keep what we have and just continue to try to get better and build upon it. And he's always talking about fundamentals and stuff. So you're not going to trade away your safety, right? Well, you do. You trade away your starting safety. And I understand Quandre Diggs wasn't having his best season, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't that bad. So why would you change that, right? I think it was deeper than necessarily, oh, he was just not playing well.
For us, and certainly in a situation where moving forward, hopefully we have some players that can still help us, even if we have to or do make a move like we did yesterday. So those other guys are going to have to step up. They're going to have to go play and try to do everything they can to help us to win. But the team's got to push forward and get ready for the Giants.
I mean, they may not talk about that, but we know Darius Slay and Quandre Diggs are like basically best friends. They're always with each other on social media, and that's cool. I mean, I'm good with that. I don't care. But anyways, they're like really good friends. So as I look into this, I'm thinking after I watched what Matt Patricia had to say after he traded him, and he said for long term, Matt Patricia at this point felt like he was focusing more on long-term than short-term already after the 6th game of the season. Already at the 6th game, Matt Patricia was looking into the future, not necessarily right now. And he was trying to acquire picks for the future, to me, which was crazy. I'm like, why are you doing that? And I think it was more than necessarily just, I want to just get better for long-term, and I don't think he's good. I think it was Quandre Diggs, there was a falling out somewhere in the locker room. Something went wrong when it came to how they were. And we know we need to have guys that want to buy into the system. But something was deeper, something that we don't know necessarily. We don't know what happened behind the scenes. But I think something deep happened there. And the relationship got really, really bad really fast. And Matt Patricia wanted to fix it as soon as possible. And I think it came either before or after that Vikings game when they were obliterated defensively. And Kennard was like, oh yeah, we were embarrassed. And then Snacks all of a sudden coming out and he's like, yeah, this is the worst rushing defense I've had. And that's what I'm known for. And all of a sudden, I think, the locker room was kind of in shambles, and then Diggs might have said something and it set Patricia off, and he's like, you know what? Let's fix this right now. I'm not going to have this. All of a sudden, that's a domino effect. Darius Slay looks at it and says, hey, that's my guy. You can't just trade away him. So now Darius Slay wants out, which we obviously heard at the end of the season. It separated players. It separated a lot of people. And now and that's why we keep bringing up, we brought in all these players that want to be here. That's going to be a huge difference. That will be a huge difference because I think that was one of the major factors that hit. Because ever since week 6, after that Vikings game, the Detroit Lions secondary was not good. It wasn't good. And I think it was, Darius Slay had the worst season of his career. Well, there's probably a reason for that, right? There's probably a reason for that, more than just I'm getting old. He didn't buy in, right? We know he didn't buy in. He didn't want to be here. Diggs was traded. He lost his starting safety. Tracy Walker then missed 2 games. So that's your starting safety. Now he misses 2 games. All right, now you're relying on Will Harris. You're relying on Tavon Wilson, who wasn't great. You have a lot of problems now, and players don't want out. And then you got the defensive line who's not playing very well already. Defensive line wasn't doing their job like they were in 2018. So I think all of a sudden, everybody wants out. everybody's not knowing what's going on. There's only a couple players buying in, some aren't buying in. It's a mess in the locker room, and I think it's deeper than what we just see on the field, like, oh yeah, this guy's just young, so we're struggling. I think it was deeper than that. I think we had a lot of problems in the side of a lot of things, but we may already know that, right? We may have already known that. So I don't know. I think it's a mixture of a lot of things. So now we think there's a problem in the locker room. All right. Now what the Lions did this offseason where they addressed. So they traded away Slay. Obviously they wanted to address that, bring in a new cornerback. Now the linebacker position. This is interesting because the linebacker position, it was known that Jared Davis had the worst season possibly of his career, one of the worst stretches of his career defensively. He was just terrible for the Detroit Lions at one stretch of the 2019 season. He had a couple of ups, but it was bad for a pretty good stretch. All right. And then you had the young Jelani Tabai, who was in there, who was kind of that main guy. And he's still a rookie last year, still a rookie. So what did the Lions do this offseason? They spent their most money they spent defensively to go get a linebacker. So obviously linebacker position was huge. On the defensive line, you addressed it. You obviously filled in replacements for guys that you had to. You had to do that. The secondary, you traded away Slay. You also signed Desmond Trufant and used your top pick on Jeffrey Okudah. See, to me, Justin Coleman is not that he was necessarily bad or, he was just bad. Something had to happen because there's a reason you fall off. There's one thing that's getting worse. There's another thing that goes from being a good secondary to the worst in the league. There's a lot more to it than just, we got younger. A couple players were injured. I think it's a mixture of everything. There were injuries, right? Deshaun Hand only played in 3 games. We saw injuries across the board, secondary, and then you weren't very deep. So once injuries hit, you were really hurt. Injuries happened. Players didn't want to be here, okay? I think there was a mix of everything. Some players weren't that talented. A lot of players were young. It was a mix of a lot of different things, and it caused the Lions defense to be bad. But at the same time, as I go back and look at those first 5 games, I'm thinking to myself, this defense, from the 2018 season, we always say, hey, the defense was good. In 2019, for the first 5 games, the defense wasn't that bad. And even though you allowed over 100 yards rushing every game, in the secondary, you were pretty darn good. So I think Matt Patricia, once again, has shown us he can make it work. Now he just needs the players to buy in. So hopefully in 2020 it does. I'm sorry, I just wanted to discuss that a little bit. If you guys got any comments, comment below. I don't think there's any wrong answers to this. I just honestly want to just get my thoughts out there on what I've came up with so far. If I come up with anything else, I'll give it to you guys. I've watched a lot. I think, on the field, play action, that all that stuff hurt them. But it wasn't like teams were doing that before, right? It wasn't like, they can't run. No one could run the football before. Now they can run the ball. In the second half, it seems like they didn't run it as well, which is crazy. But all of a sudden your secondary got worse. So how does that happen? I think it was really, and it makes sense, right? It makes sense that the secondary got worse because we're not saying, obviously the defense as a whole was bad. We know the defense was bad. But the secondary took the biggest dip because the run game defense was never that good last season. It was never that good. It wasn't necessarily, I think, that Snacks wanted out as much as Snacks didn't play that well. And all of a sudden he kind of used that excuse that he never wanted to come here. That's why he signed an extension. Snacks, they're not slick. We understand. The run game was never that good last season. The front 7 struggled. The linebackers struggled. I don't think it was necessarily those guys not buying in because you draft them. A lot of those guys were young. I think what it was is the secondary. It makes sense. Your secondary was good. All of a sudden, it became the worst in the league. Why did that happen? What happened between great and bad? What happened? What was in between that? And the biggest thing I can point to, the most obvious thing, is you traded away Quandre Diggs. Now, some people will say, okay, well, hold up. He was there for the Vikings game. He was. And I think the Vikings game was honestly just something that may have set them over the edge. All right, I think that was one of those things that was like, it went really bad, and Patricia probably was not happy, and maybe Patricia said something that the players didn't like, and the players like, hey, I don't like it, or whatever. Maybe they spoke out of something. I mean, that was the rumors that he said something in the locker room, and Matt Patricia's like, you know what? Let's do it then. Let's make the move. We'll get you out of here. All of a sudden, the Slay's mad, and the secondary falls down. There's no leaders in the secondary. You lost Quandre Diggs, who I'm sure a lot of young guys looked up to. You lost your Darius Slay doesn't want to be there, and a lot of guys looking up to Slay like, that's our best corner now. He doesn't want to be here. What the heck? How am I feeling after this? Right? You're losing these guys. You don't have Glover Quinn anymore, who's that leader defensively. Glover Quinn was an absolute leader in the secondary, but you don't have him anymore. I think it was really that secondary took a big dip. The Lions defense wasn't that great because the front 7 wasn't that great, but that secondary, there's a reason they went from great to completely awful, and it has to be something like that within the locker room that we didn't get to see, something behind the scenes. So let me know what you guys think. Any thoughts? Let me know your thoughts, comments below. Thank you for watching. I don't know what else to say, and I'm out.